Welcome to the Blacksmith Chronicles podcast, the official podcast of Ryan Johnson Ministries. This podcast was created for the purpose of equipping others for the advancement of the kingdom of God. We hope that you enjoy this episode and encourage you to subscribe to the Blacksmith Chronicles today. For more information about Ryan Johnson Ministries, please visit www.ryanjohnson.us or email us directly at info@ryanjohnson.us.
Hey guys, and welcome to the Blacksmith Chronicles podcast. I'm very excited about this week's episode because of our special guest, for the message, for the heart that she carries in this hour, for the assignment that God has marked her, and for the cause that she is going to advance the kingdom of God in the midst of darkness. Without further ado, I want to welcome our guest this week, Miss Janet Porter. Janet, thank you so much for being a part of this week's episode.
Thank you. It's my privilege. So grateful.
Could you, for those of you that may not be familiar with the work that Janet does and who she is, where she's from, stuff, kind of give us a glimpse, an idea of who Janet Porter is?
Sure. A lot of people who have been in the pro-life movement for a while, they still remember me as Janet Folger. I got married late in life, and I had been a part of the whole pro-life movement, had worked to pass such laws such as the woman's right to know law, the 24-hour waiting period, the parental consent, fetal homicide, and even lobbied for the nation's first ban on partial birth abortion. And so I'd been very involved in the pro-life movement for much of my life. I had worked as the national director for the Center for Reclaiming America with Dr. D. James Kennedy, and then started Faith to Action back in 2003, I believe it was. And God put an idea in my heart after my husband, I dragged my Florida husband back to Ohio, to my home state. And he looked at me one day, Ryan, and he just said, well, you know, out of the heart, the mouth speaks. And he said, why don't you outlaw abortion while you're here? Just matter-of-factly. And, you know, being such a great woman of faith, I laughed at him. I looked at my watch and said, I got a few minutes. I could knock that out. And it seemed too big. But he had known of my involvement in the pro-life arena in Ohio. And the state of Ohio's motto is, with God, all things are possible. And so you either believe it or you don't. And what I'm learning is that actions are what you believe. Everything else is religious talk. Actions are what you believe. And so a couple of weeks later, that idea must have taken root in my heart, because God gave me the idea to say that if we can't rescue every child just yet, let's carry out as many of them as we can out of the burning building, so to speak. And that's when the heartbeat bill was birthed. It was basically a bill that says if a heartbeat's detected, the baby's protected. And we assembled a team, introduced it, and we fought for nearly a decade to get it passed in the home state of Ohio. But since that time, it's been introduced in 29 states. It's passed in 10. Tennessee was the latest state to pass it. In fact, here's the list of the states. It passed in Arkansas and North Dakota in 2013, then in Iowa. And then last year, we saw more advancement in the pro-life arena than we've seen in the last 47 years. We saw the heartbeat bills become law in Kentucky, Mississippi, Georgia, Missouri, Louisiana, Ohio, and just recently Tennessee. And so it's something that has captured the heart of a nation. And we're actually talking now with other nations, including Asia, with Israel, with even Japan is drafting a heartbeat bill. And so God is in this, and he's moving. It just seemed that for a really, really long time, I remember even telling my husband, I said, I felt like I used to feel like David, where I'd see the giants fall and God was blessing everything I touched. I said, but man, I'm feeling like Saul these days, like his hand is off me. He just looked at me and he said, you know what? Sometimes the impossible takes a little longer. So people ask me, what's the key to changing history, changing and ending abortion? It's just not giving up. I just didn't quit. I knew the idea was from God. I knew he was in it. I just didn't know how long it was going to take or how hard it was going to be. But I knew he was going to do it in the end, and he ultimately did. It was long and it was hard, but the message is it was worth it. When you follow God, it is worth it, no matter the cost.
I love that. And I want to ask, I'm familiar with the heartbeat bill. This is something that, of course, I'm born and raised out of the state of Alabama. I know what the state of Alabama did pretty recently. I kind of know the strategy behind that in hopes that it would face the Supreme Court and get a child in the womb to be considered a citizen, a living being. But in this process, when your husband says this to you, and it seems like an obstacle that's so huge,
Mm-hmm.
and at this time, I mean, you're not a governor, you're not, what we would consider an esteemed elected official that has this power in their hand to be able to do this stuff. How did you start to work out the strategy to see this bill come into existence?
I'm an ordinary person, and that's really the takeaway, that anybody can do this. So what happened was we had just moved to Ohio. In fact, it was the first week in December where we had a housewarming party. And I had a big house full of people, and I don't know, 4 or 5 of them stayed over rather than drive all the way back, several hours back to their home. And I greeted my guests with breakfast and a whiteboard. And I put this whiteboard out in my living room, and I wrote 2 words that the world had never heard before, and I put heartbeat bill. So that's what it's called, heartbeat bill. And so we started brainstorming, how are we going to do this? And somebody said to me that they had a state rep's number of a guy that I knew back in the 80s. He had been term limited out, and he had just returned there. And I said, we should have prayed about it, but I said, call him right now. And so if anybody knows me, that's generally my default is do it now. And so we call the cell phone, and I call him up, and I said, Lynn, it's Janet Folger. Now I'm Porter. He says, Folger, you got married? I said, yeah, with God, all things are possible. So he turns out was the chairman of the committee that would be hearing such a bill. And so we drafted the bill and started gathering co-sponsors. And one of the things I learned is that if you want to get something done, you do your work ahead of time. Before we told the world about what we were doing, I went behind the scenes and pitched it to we actually have 99 members of the House in Ohio. I needed 50 of them. I needed at least 50 because I wanted to show everybody we've got the votes for this because they put their names on as co-sponsors. So we started gathering co-sponsors, and we introduced the bill. I'll tell you a little bit about it. I wrote about this in the book. Sometimes when you don't have a lot of money and you're not an elected official, an esteemed, person with a big budget, you know what? You can make up for it with a lot of creativity, with a lot of prayer and some creativity. And if you want creativity, it's an easy thing. All you do is ask the Creator. He'll give you the ideas. And so on the opening, Sean, you'll like this, Ryan, rather. The opening, we had balloons. We did a musical parody of 99 red balloons, all right? And because we had 99 members of the House, and people would send 99 red heart balloons. And we ended up sending 4,000 of these red heart balloons. And in the press conference, they went from the floor to the ceiling all around the room. And we delivered them the day of the press conference, the introduction of the bill, and everybody in the State House got a great big bouquet of red heart Mylar balloons. And even the pro board said, well, where's my balloons? And my friend says, oh, they're coming. There was not a person in the State House that did not know about the heartbeat bill the day we launched this. It was around Valentine's Day of 2011. And so as the hearings started progressing, we had hearings from our chairman, who was the main sponsor. And you'll like this. We actually brought in the youngest to ever testify. We had a mobile ultrasound, and we brought in a bunch of pregnant women. And one of them was pregnant with a little baby girl she had already named Haley. So little Haley's up on the screen, and you see her heart beating, and of course the pro aborts are going nuts. They, Janet and her antics and her, she's got her gimmicks, and they put the camera on me, and I said, isn't it sad that to defend your position, you've got to deny science. You've got to run from technology. That's a sad place to be. And interestingly, in the congressional version, when we introduced the federal heartbeat bill in Congress, we brought in a little baby Lincoln who was 18 weeks old in the womb. And, there were protesters there, and, they're all coming out with their garb, and they're distractive and, just disruptive. And so they're in the meeting, but when little Lincoln's heart was beating, and, they can zoom in and make it red, you can see it, and you hear the heartbeat, the entire committee room was silent. And one of the protesters, who was previously being disruptive, was seen wiping tears from her eyes in the federal hearing. And that told me what I had not known, that if the heartbeat of this unborn baby can reach even the hardest of hearts, even the protesters, it can reach America. And that's what the poll found out. We did a Barna research poll and found that guess what? 7 out of 10 in America believe that if a doctor can detect the heartbeat of an unborn baby, that baby should be legally protected. 69%, a scientific George Barna poll. Also, 86% of Republicans believe that. And here's the thing, and I'm glad you're sitting down. The majority of Democrats support the heartbeat bill becoming law. And I'm not talking about the Joe Biden and the upper echelons, but the people, the Democratic people believe that if you've got a heartbeat, you've got a baby, and you've got a baby that is worthy of legal protection. Everybody gets that. I mean, that's why we check for a pulse. I mean, that's why we have those heart monitors in hospitals. We know they're not there for decoration. Everybody gets it. It's the universal indicator of life that we can no longer ignore when it comes to the smallest members of our human family.
With that being said, what is the stance of the opposition? I mean, when you said those that were against it, when they're hearing this, they're defying science and saying, okay, I'm going against this. But, I guess I'm sitting here going, how can you hear this and not recognize it? So what exactly, when you're going, for lack of better word, when you're going toe to toe with the opposition, you're trying to get them to understand the importance of this bill, the importance of life.
Yeah.
What is their defense in this?
They have no defense. What they would do, and it's funny because you've seen the bumper sticker. We've all had it. Abortion stops a beating heart. That's for decades. We've had it. And the pro-aborts for all of these years have said, no, it's not true. It's a lie from the right-wing anti-choice movement, right? They actually came in and testified how early that baby's heart is beating. There was one of the women for the pro-abortion movement said, this will outlaw all abortions. And I sat there thinking, you know what? The heartbeat is beating at 18 to 21 days, but we actually can't detect it scientifically yet until 6 to 8 weeks. But isn't it interesting? This will actually protect almost every child facing abortion. And the abortion mills, they're in it for money. And it may very well be that they don't stay open for a fraction of their business. And that's what I can't wait. I can't wait till the doors are closed and children are protected and women are helped with a solution that they and their children can live with. That's really what the pro-life movement's all about, helping women, helping children with a choice other than a dead child. And so it shows just how heartless the pro-abortion movement is. I mean, to deny a heartbeat is to deny science. To ignore it is heartless. And that's really it. And that's what we faced. But what we didn't expect to face, and it's why it's in the subtitle, a heartbeat away, how the heartbeat bill will pierce the heart of Roe v. Wade and the shocking betrayal no one saw coming. This is something that states need to be ready for that they may not be ready for. And that is the people that you think are going to be on your side that aren't on your side. Keep in mind, Ryan, I was part of the establishment. I worked to pass all those incremental bills. And, they moved the ball down the field, a millimeter at a time. And the bottom line is Dr. Wilkie, the founder of the pro-life movement, who left the Right to Life establishment to join our effort. He said, hey, that approach, he goes, I was Mr. Incrementalism, he told the New York Times. He said, but that approach did not get us far enough, fast enough. Here we are nearly 50 years later, 50 years after Roe versus Wade, and we still have 1 million casualties every single year. People say, well, it's just 900,000. Well, you got states like California that don't even report. We know we have over 1 million abortions that legally occur in this country every year. You can call the pro-life movement a lot of things, but with 60 million dead and 1 million more killed every year, success is not a descriptive word you could use for the pro-life movement. And so the pro-life movement, sadly enough, as I was once part of it, I was the legislative director of Ohio Right to Life for nearly 10 years. But when we introduced the heartbeat bill, we did it right. We went with them, we talked to them, we support your incremental bills. Will you support ours? Oh, they said, yeah. But as I was putting people on the bill as co-sponsors, they were lobbying. I can believe this. They were lobbying to take people off the bill. It was the most amazing things. Then they came in and testified right next to Planned Parenthood, right next to the National Abortion Rights Action League, against the most protective pro-life bill to ever pass in the state. Then when we finally passed it above their objections in 2016 and in 2018, Ohio Right to Life called for a veto of the most protective bill to ever pass in the legislature. And when Governor Kasich vetoed the bill, they celebrated right next to the abortionist when it came. And then in 2019, when we finally got the bill through with a pro-life governor, they ran to the front of the parade. You wouldn't believe this. They ran to the front of the parade. They pretended that they supported the bill and stood at the bill signing as if they had something to do with it, said it was their greatest accomplishment to date. It was the most, honestly, if I wouldn't have lived through it, I wouldn't have believed it. And yet everything in here is documented. But what I found is it wasn't unique to Ohio. It happened in Texas. It happened in Kansas. It happened in Indiana. It happened in Missouri. It happened in Tennessee, where you've got pro-life groups, including National Right to Life, that withdrew their endorsement from these pro-life champions like Congressman Steve King. They didn't endorse him. They endorsed his opponent and cost a guy with a 100% pro-life voting record, the champion, not just for the heartbeat bill, but a bill from conception, protection from conception as well, and cost him his job. It's appalling. The book is, as someone told me today, it's a tell-all book, but it's a story that needs to be told. And it's one that will enlighten people and shock many, but will give you the equipment, the tools you need to get even over the greatest obstacles and from people that should be your allies.
It's in one way, it's not shocking. It's not surprising. It's definitely heartbreaking. I'll say that, and devastating to hear those stories. But I often find in my own life, the things that we do, the things that we say, there's a lot of people that is for it until it comes time to be it.
That's right.
And then they're suddenly, adamantly against you. And then when there's breakthrough, they show up as if they always were there.
Yes.
So there's a lot of that kind of doesn't throw me off, but I know there's people listening that's going, my gosh, I just can't wrap my mind around this and stuff. But in that line of thinking, why is it so important that we as a nation and as a body of believers in understanding that there's an importance to know what life is? Why is the heartbeat bill so valuable, whereas there's been so many other things that have monetarily sustained, an effort, but really not progressed like the heartbeat bill? What is it truly that separates it? I know we're going to say the heartbeat, but there's something significant about it. Do you believe it's because it's exposing that, or do you believe it's because there's the realization that this truly is life?
Well, I think that what the heartbeat bill does is it gives the pro-life movement something we've been missing for 47 years, and that is a clear pathway to victory. All these millimeter incremental bills, they're finding well, but they don't do the job. If we want different results, we've got to try something different. And I had been a part of the South Dakota effort and personhood amendments to try and get them all at once. It's sort of like you've got a couple of different philosophies. If there's a burning building and there's a daycare center inside, what's the approach you take? Do you say we're going to get all of them or none of them? That's kind of the personhood approach in many cases. They don't want to try anything except all at once or nothing. Then you've got the incremental approach that says, well, we'll rescue the kids on the playground. We're 100% sure we can get those kids rescued, but we don't want to risk anything we might lose. No, the heartbeat approach is you go in and you carry out as many kids as you can, and then you go back and you get the rest. This bill is an incremental bill, but it's a great big increment. It will protect nearly every child facing abortion today. And what we've got to do is we need to make a decision. Do you want to march about abortion? Are you happy talking about abortion? Because I'm not. I'm sick of it. What we need to do is we need to end abortion. And that's really what the heartbeat bill is all about. It comes the closest to ending abortion of any incremental bill there is. And it's a bill that is not only catching the nation by storm. You've got 29 states that introduced it, 10 that have passed it so far. You got to remember, when I first pitched this idea, they said, one of the newspapers said they was laughed out of the room. It couldn't be done. It was too big and too much and too impossible. Well, again, the state motto is, with God, all things are possible. And here's the decision you got to make. Am I going to do the status quo that make me friends with all the establishment? Because one of the oppositions, the wall of resistance, is also made up of people that have been counting on your vote, that have been running for re-election over and over again, telling you how pro-life they are, using babies to get elected instead of using elections to protect babies. So they're going around telling everybody how pro-life they are until we actually ask them to do something that will actually end abortion in most every case. I mean, I'll just give you the case in point was Governor John Kasich. I'll just tell you, I used to be his spokesperson back in the 80s when he was the chairman of the House Budget Committee. I represented him. I actually debated his opponent for him because, you know, he was too busy, and I believed he was a pro-lifer. And I was the one who was, you know, I got invited to all the photo ops and had an audience with the Pope and pictures with the president. When you're working your tail off and asking them for virtually nothing back in return, hey, can you give us parental consent? Hey, can you defund abortion? That's not getting to the heart of what we really want. We want the killing to end. And when we ask these rhinos, Republicans in name only, R-I-N-O, when we're asking them for what we really want, that's when you start seeing that they're not so friendly anymore. They're not so much your buddy anymore. And so there's a chapter in The Heartbeat Away where it's called Whatever It Takes. And it was where we took a turn from everybody supporting the heartbeat bill. We had big rallies. We filled up the State House on a weekday and overflow outside the state. We had all kinds of support, and 5 foot was a 5 foot list of supporters all over the country. But when we started taking these people to task, when we started running full page ads, asking them if they're a Republican in name only, or if they're a real Republican and they adhere to the pro-life plank in the platform, when we started running against them in the primaries, 3 election cycles, we ran against these senators who were blocking our bill. I actually ran against the Senate president. How do you think that went over? Not so great, but we made them work. We made them spend money. I'm told they spent $1.3 million, and I believe it because they slandered me in so many mailings I've lost count, television commercials, radio commercials, on every break, even on Christian radio. My niece was listening, talking about Janet Porter and how I was not the pro-lifer. Kind of funny. She goes, they sure don't know Aunt Janet. They lie, and that's what they do. But you know what? We kept going. We would not quit, and we wore them out. In fact, the guy that I ran against ran to the front of the parade along with Ohio Right to Life and claimed all kinds of credit when he was one of the key people blocking the bill. But this is what it is. In fact, Mark Crutcher, a buddy of mine from Life Dynamics, I'd call him up during the war and I'd say, man, this is tough. This is hard. He says, well, did you go down to Columbus to make friends? Did you go down there to end abortion? And he's from Texas. And I said, I want to end abortion. And that matters a whole lot more than whether you're at a photo op, whether you're liked, whether you have a bunch of people I mean, there were times when I felt like I could count my friends on one hand, but at least I knew who they were. And so the message in this is, the takeaway is, it doesn't take an army. It doesn't take a village. If you are a sold out Christian who believes in the God of the impossible, the God of the Bible, that his word is true, that he's everything he claims to be, just you, and I would say a friend. Jesus sent his disciples out 2 by 2. There was one friend I talked to her on the phone today, Lori Vyers. She stood with me from the beginning to the end. And they were tough times. There were times where we were not liked. We were slandered. We were, op-eds about us and speeches about us and all kinds of things. We were viewed as the pariah. But you want to know what? Again, it's all about the fear of God over the fear of man. And if you fear God, he's gonna show up for you. He's gonna deliver you the victory, and that's what he did. It can happen in a purple state like Ohio. It can happen where you live, and even in states that maybe deep blue. If you're in New York or California, just introducing the heartbeat bill. You know what that's like doing? It's like putting a billboard across your state that says abortion stops a beating heart. But instead of abortion stopping a beating heart, with the heartbeat bill, a beating heart will stop abortion. And just the publicity about the bill ended up saving lives before we ever got the bill passed through the committee. I actually saw a picture, little baby Aiden, who was spared when one of the staffers at the State House was asked to drive down to the abortion mill to help take his life. And she said, once I found out about the heartbeat, I just couldn't do it. And she thought the appointment was going to go on, and they didn't cancel it. But weeks go by, months go by, she came up and hugged me and said, we saved his life. and here's what he looks like, is what was once his mother's biggest problem is now her greatest blessing, her pride and joy. There's his picture on Facebook, and it was just such a wonderful thing. And that was before the bill ever became law. And that's the message, that just this information, just introducing this bill in your state will save lives.
Why is it so important that you took this to state levels and didn't try to go straight to the Supreme Court? Why I understand why, but I want the listeners to understand why you had to go and why this is growing state by state.
Well, we did also take this to Congress in 2017. I guess I got sick of beating up against a brick wall and losing, right? So we took it over their heads. But what we did from the beginning, and make no mistake, we crafted this arrow very carefully to be what pierces the heart of Roe versus Wade. That right now there are 10 states that have launched this arrow through the court system that it's designated, it's designed by design to be the fatal blow to abortion on demand. That's what it's for. And so the way to do that is you pass a law and you launch that up through the court system. And that's what we're doing. We're doing it in 29 states that are working to get it passed, 10 that have already launched it, and then the congressional version, which, we ended up in Congress with more co-sponsors than any other pro-life bill in Congress. I mean, it was crazy to see 174, but in the end, National Right to Life was one of the groups blocking the most protective pro-life bill. Keep in mind, this bill, the heartbeat bill, will protect more babies than every other law we have passed in the last 47 years combined. To oppose a bill like that, not only is it heartless, it is absolutely appalling that you cannot call yourself a pro-life group and block a bill that will protect nearly every child. You just can't do it. And so we're exposing a lot of sheep from a lot of goats. And it's wheat and tares. We're seeing it, and so when you talk to people along the campaign trail and they say, "Oh, I'm pro-life, count on me," ask them where they stand on the heartbeat bill. That's a litmus test, because it's where we put the rubber to the road, where we actually see what we've been marching about. We can actually do what we've been debating and talking about all these years. It's time to do what we said we were set out to do, and that is stop abortion, to end the killing.
So you've put this and a lot of other information in this book form, and I am so thankful that Destiny has released this for you.
Yeah.
But I want you to kind of elaborate, and you can give examples, whatever you want to do. I want people to understand why it's so important to get the book, because you could have simply taken the route of the media. But the problem that we face right now in the media is getting the proper information into the hands that is actually truthful and not a representation of someone's opinion or ideology or whatever the case may be. Why is the book so important to get your hands on in a time where we look to media to be the end all of end all in our information?
Because the media is the enemy. I'm just going to flat out say it. They are the tool. I saw a speech from President Trump not too long ago, and he says, so great to see here at this event so many met so many of the advocates of the Biden campaign, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSDNC, all the rest. These are operatives of the enemy. They are, and I write about that, and I wrote about some of the interviews we've done, what I've learned, how to do them. By the way, don't do an interview with the New York Times without videoing it. They flew to my house. I said, "Listen, I'm going to an interview with you. I'm going to record it." And when they got to my house, I had the camera ready, and they said, "No, we're not going to do it." I said, "Well, thanks so much for coming. Have a good day." I'm not about to hand over a videotape that they can cut and splice and do what they want without having proof of what it is I really said. I've been burned too many times. They did it. They selectively edited Nightline. They selectively edit at CNN. I wrote about that in the book during the Roy Moore campaign. But I actually dedicated this book to President Donald J. Trump. And this is what I wrote. He said, "Unborn children have never had a stronger defender in the White House." These are words the president spoke at the March for Life. He's the only president in our history that actually spoke at the March for Life. He says, "They are coming after me because I am fighting for you, and we are fighting for those who have no voice." Then he said this, and we will win because we know how to win. And I'm going to get this to them. I don't know how I'm going to get this to them, but I'm going to get this book to them because for the very next thing I wrote was the heartbeat bill is the way to win. It is the wedge in the wall of Roe versus Wade. Keep in mind, let me give you the legal strategy. What the court has said, it says states, you're allowed to protect children if there's a likelihood of survival to live birth. And the measurement they're using now is viability. It's a guess. They take a measurement and they take a guess. How old is this kid? Let's just think we might be able to, they could actually be 90% wrong with their guess. But you want to know something? We've got a better marker, because if there is a heartbeat, if there is a detectable heartbeat, there is a 95 to 98% likelihood of survival to live birth. In fact, when the heartbeat bill in Arkansas and North Dakota went up to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, the 8th Circuit says, look, we're bound by precedent to strike this down, but they begged the court to take it up. And they said that they have found a more, quote, certain and consistent measurement than the one the court's currently using, a measurement of our technology called viability. So we've got a better measurement. In fact, what we're telling the court, you don't have to admit that you've just slaughtered more than 60 million American lives. We can just say we've got a better measurement for you. Instead of being miles away from our goal of conception, we're inches away. Because if we determine heartbeat, by the way, technology is getting better and better. As you know, it improves all the time. We're going to be able to hear that heartbeat younger and younger and save a whole lot more babies. Even with just this bill, even if we don't amend it in the future, we're still going to save the majority of lives and more as the technology improves.
You know, I can hear so many people saying, "Oh gosh, here we go. This is another conspiracy theorist, and the idea that the media is out to get us, and the media is out to misrepresent, and the media is out to do that and everything." But there is a reality that the enemy can work through the media in the misrepresentation of proper information. For example, you were given the statistics of a child's heartbeat being detected in 6 to 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't hear that through the media that much. Well, you don't hear that information. And I believe this is just a minute example of why it's so important for the body of Christ to educate themselves, to understand what is necessary, because unfortunately we can't. And I want to really kind of put an understanding so that everyone that's listening or watching, I don't believe every journalist is evil, or every journalist has a wicked mandate in their life. However, there are an overwhelming large majority that has a grand scheme behind the black curtain. I'll say it that way. In that, before we went on live, Janet was sharing a story, just an interview, whether you want to elaborate on what the story is about, whatever. So
yeah, I'd be happy to.
This is so fascinating to me, because I want people, it's so important for you to get the information into your hands, to know what it is that you're talking about. It's one thing to say I'm pro-life. It's another thing to know why you are pro-life. What are the statistics? What is the information? Because there's this constant barrage of a liberal agenda and assignment to silence the voice of the body of Christ in measures specifically in this arena. So you were being interviewed and you had the wisdom, but then there was still manipulation that happened in the interview. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I actually wrote another book called The Criminalization of Christianity. It's funny, I was just on a seminar with Cindy Jacobs, who was quoting it. She thought it was prophetic. I wrote it, 15 years ago, and the things that I predicted were happening they're all happening. If you don't know that the media is biased by now, then you need to get this book, because we make out the case not only is the media biased, a handful of companies are directing the talking points that you hear on your stations every day. But there's also a chapter called The Dark Web, a systematic attempt to silence our voice, that what's happening on the internet, which is is the new public square, the new public domain and exchange of ideas. What they're doing is they're silencing us. They're manipulating the search engines. Google is doing it. And there are, in fact, the guy that voted for Hillary is one of the people who helped to expose this in the Senate Judiciary Committee and said, the Senate committee's hearing this, I'm not sure which judiciary, but it was 15 million votes that they can turn by giving people selected information. This is what's happening on television. As we talked about when I did an interview, the first interview I did on the homosexual issue, I'll never forget it. It was on Nightline. And what I found is we recorded it when I was the national director of the Center for Reclaiming America. I'd been in the arena for life for many, many years. But the first issue I did, the first interview I did on the homosexual issue was this thing on Nightline. And what they did was absolutely so appalling. I never would have believed it if I didn't experience it. They had a guy on there. His name was Andrew Sullivan. And he accused me of working with somebody in the campaign to expose the fact that homosexuality, people can leave it, that there's hope for change, and hundreds of people who have left the homosexual lifestyle. And he said, "You're working with a guy that wants the death penalty for homosexuals." And he said his name, and I said, I said, not only is that not what this campaign's about, not only am I not working with this guy, I never even heard his name. I don't ever heard of his name before. And what Nightline did is they left in the accusation and they took out my response. So if you're watching the show at home and you say, "Wow, it sure looks like she's avoiding the question." And so what we did is when I was jumping in to help our friend Roy Moore, a godly man, what they said about him was just absolutely reprehensible and completely and totally false, and has since been proven so. And so I went on Anderson Cooper, and they called me up and they said, we can only do you taped. We can only record you taped. I said, "No, thanks then. Not interested." They couldn't believe I would turn down their wonderful show. I said, "I'm not going to do it." A few minutes later, they called me back and said, "Well, it turns out that, this is the only way we can get you. We'll go ahead and do live." I said, "All right." So I go and I went on the interview live, and he comes up with all these getcha questions, right? And so it was supposed to be 7 minutes long. That's what they told me. It went to 15 minutes or so. All right, I'll go live. That's fine. We get back to the hotel room. My husband and I are in Alabama in the hotel room. We're watching CNN, one of the only times I ever watched CNN. And it says, "Coming up next, Roy Moore spokesperson." And I'm like, that must be a mistake, because I was just on for a quarter of the show. Turns out they went back to plan A. They took the interview that ran live, and then they spliced it during the show to air on the same show, to make it look like I didn't answer the questions, to make it look even, then it got worse. The next night, they edited overnight and made me look even worse. I mean, it was the butt of jokes on Stephen Colbert and all these other shows, because they manipulate and they edit to make you look as bad as you can. This is what it was. In fact, remember, I went to the campaign headquarters. I told Judge Roy Moore, I'm done with fake news for a while. I think I'm going to take a break, because what they do is absolutely appalling, and most people don't realize it. They think that we're just really inept at being spokespeople, that we just can't get our message out, and sometimes that's true. But in the case of the CNNs or the MSNBCs, you see the selective editing, and it is. I mean, I had a master's degree in communication. I took the journalism classes, and it was one of my majors. And that is not what journalism was. It's not to be an advocate for a position at all costs. And that's what it sadly has become. That's why it's called fake news. That's really what is happening. And if you're watching CNN, turn it off. Fox has got its problems, but at least it's got some very good, reporters like Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity, et cetera.
Yeah, it's funny because I really want people to adhere to what you're saying, because I'm constantly now running into so many professing Christians who genuinely believe that everything that they're being fed, that there's not a greater motive. And if I, as an individual, much less a Christian, question the narrative of what I'm being told, I'm automatically labeled a conspiracy theorist. I saw a meme yesterday.
It said that Noah was a conspiracy theorist until it started to rain. So.
Yeah, I've seen that. And it's so funny because it's I want to tell a lot of Christians, did you know they took the word gullible out of the dictionary? Because it seems like Christians are the first to be gullible about everything. And we're all guilty of it. I mean, we're all guilty of it. I'm saying that we fall victim to a lot of things that we believe were real and they won't, but we can't lose the ability of two things. Number one, questioning the narrative that we're always being told. There's a lot of Christians, unfortunately, they have never questioned what exactly happens when a child is aborted in the womb and out of the womb. There's those individuals. There are the individuals that really, if you ask them, are they against abortion? They'll say yes, but then ask them for what reason, and they have no explanation. They just, well, I just believe that, it's a right to life. And in this hour, that's not good enough. We've got to be definitive in what it is and why we're doing this. Now, I'm saying all that to say to this one thing right here, because in reading up on some of your history and stuff and everything, but even a modern quote about Janet Porter, I love this. This just owns me, is that you have been called or labeled or identified one of the 5 most dangerous religious right leaders in Trump's America. That, when I read that just, it owned me. Number one, I love it. Just the fact that that's the clarification of that, because I automatically think of Leonard Ravenhill that said, my goal every day is to make hell's top 10 list. That every morning I wake up, all of hell goes, oh hell, Leonard's awake. And Ravenhill passed away in 94. And when I learned that later, when I was born again, I learned that statement. I said, I think I want to live that way. And that's what I've done to try to poke the bear of the demonic realm and such and everything. But why is it exactly you're labeled one of the 5 most dangerous religious right leaders? I love this, but why are you that threat?
Well, it's funny because Right Wing Watch has been watching me for quite some time, and it wasn't until I was starting my campaign to run for the Senate against the Senate president, because he was blocking our Ohio heartbeat bill. And I saw another article, and it pings on the email, and it says, Janet Porter running for state senate, and I did something I never do. I read it, and I turned out it took me back to the Right Wing Watch site, and I didn't realize, but actually on their site, I am the 2nd most watched woman in America after Michelle Bachmann, and I'm gaining on her. I'm the 2nd most watched woman in America, and I thought, hey, you know what? Things seem pretty bleak right now, and I'm not seeming to get a whole lot done right now, but the enemy hates me. And I told this to Tom DeLay, who helped us in the federal heartbeat bill. I said, you know what? It's sort of like Gideon. You're not sure what you're facing a big battle. It doesn't look very likely. Go down. God told him, go down to the enemy's camp, see what they're saying about you. And if the enemy hates me so badly, maybe they've gotten wind that I'm going to do something. And that gave me a lot of encouragement, believe it or not. In fact, when I was going around, I remember one Republican party in Mansfield in Richland County, Ohio, middle of the state. They didn't want me to speak because I'm running against their golden boy, the president of the Senate. He's telling everybody how pro-life he is, right? Well, they didn't want me to speak, but some pro-lifers insisted on it. So I gave the speech at this Republican event. And everybody say, I say I'm pro-life and he says he's pro-life, but you want to know how you cut to the chase? What does the enemy think of you? And so I told this group that I'm the 2nd most watched woman in America by the far left. And the people who were previously blocking me were giving me standing ovations. I mean, it's something to see that beware when all men speak well of you. If you're hated by the enemy, very often there's a very good reason for that. And I'm very happy to know that somebody put me on the top 5 lists of the enemies in Trump's America. I wear that as a badge of honor. When people, they slander you and they run all kinds of lies. There's a reason why they're fighting so hard, is because we're going to advance the kingdom of God. You know what I'm tired of doing? I'm tired of reacting and responding and defending a shrinking piece of real estate. It's time that we actually say, all right, let's get with God. Let's get with a strategy that can advance his kingdom, not only in the life arena, but in every arena we face, all the mountains of influence, as they call them. Why aren't we taking over the media instead of just complaining about how negative it is and how the entertainment is slandering and blaspheming God and ridiculing our values? Why not? Why not take it back? And that's one of the things that I talk about in the book. The reason why that we're not doing what we're doing, I think the number one reason is fear of man. They're going to make fun of us. They're going to ridicule us. I talked to somebody yesterday and they said, I don't think I could run for office because I know what the enemy does. We need to grow some thick skin. We need to actually get a stronger backbone and say, you know what? I don't care about what men say. I care about what God says. And I don't want to get to heaven and say, I had so much more for you to do, but you didn't do it. But people, when they're afraid, there's a Francis Schaeffer quote I wrote about in my book. And he said, faith is not a leaf in the dark. It's ceasing to call God a liar. If God says that we can do the impossible, then that means we can do it. And that means that we can see the end of abortion and all the things that they say is impossible. You know what? I think we ought to be the ones that are reporting the news in a fair and balanced way, what Fox set out to do, but seems to have lost their way. Why aren't we taking over the education system? And why aren't we the ones that are the voices in the science sphere and in the family? We need to regain that position of influence. We've been given power and authority, and the problem in the church is that we don't know how to use it. We have cowered in fear. Many people have we're just going to survive until the rapture. No, I want to take back the ground. I want to plunder the gates of hell. As that Reinhard Bunke used to say, is that he wants hell empty and heaven full. We need to be spreading the gospel and realizing that, our time is short. We've got a country right now to rise up and defend, which is why it's so important. I wrote about it in the book, why we need to right now realize that I don't care if there's a tweet or two that I don't like. We've got a president who's willing to stand against the establishment, to stand for life, to stand for liberty, and we need to stand for President Trump. And I don't care if there's Christians that are so pious and he said a word you didn't like and a tweet you didn't care for. Hey, guess what? If Joe Biden is elected, he will dismember children with your tax dollars up until birth. That is his position, as well as taking your guns away, as well as taking your liberties away. These are real issues. And one of the biggest lies, I talked about it in one of the first chapters in this book, is the lie that the church has been told, that we as Christians better stay out of politics because it's so controversial. What that means is let the enemies of God run the government and tell you what you can and cannot do. That's the alternative. And people are starting to wake up and realize that alternative hasn't been working so well for us, that we're seeing a body count of more than 60 million children because we've let them. We have the government we deserve, and we need to take it back. And honestly, a lot of people are wringing their hands about the virus. We need to start taking authority. We need to start declaring that God is the God who says in Psalm 91, no plague shall come near our dwelling. We need to start stepping out in boldness and courage and taking back ground during this time. I believe that what we're seeing is the enemy overplaying his hand. I mean, look at what's happening in California. Are you serious? They're telling churches they can't sing praises to God. Are you even serious right now? This is the kind of stuff that they will take as much of your freedoms as you let them take. And I say no more. And that's what President Trump says, no more. And as he said in his speech, the reason they're coming after him is because they're trying to get to us and he's standing in the way. We better stand with him and provide a shield of support. I'll tell you this one other thing. I remember being at his inauguration. I was there in the crowd and I saw something I had never seen. I've been at many inaugurations, but I never saw, there were literally covens of witches in the crowd cursing our president. They're cursing our president every single day on every newscast. They have one agenda, and that is to take him down. You know what? Impeachment didn't work. Okay, so now let's try the virus. Now, this is what they do. And we need to, when you watch him on the news, you need to pray for him. When you see him at a news conference, every day we need to pray for our president, pray a shield of protection for him, and then we need to make sure that everyone we know is registered to vote. I wrote about a friend of mine. Her name is Deb Welch. She was a prayer warrior. We prayed for abortion, end abortion for many years. And it used to be that, Jan, you go get them. We'll cover you in prayer. That was what it usually was. When I saw her, I was at an event at the Trump Hotel, and she came up to me and she said, I don't even let my prayer group leave the meeting until they're registered to vote. She's now on the Central Committee. She's meeting with state legislators to get an Arizona heartbeat bill going. What happens when you have the unity of the prayer movement joining the activist movement? When you have unity, there is a blessing that is commanded, it says in the scriptures, that when you have unity, you have victory. And that's what we need to do. Get off the bench and get in this game, because the future of our country, whether or not we have freedoms, and by the way, in the latest Supreme Court decision, we realized we don't have the judges on the court that we thought we had. We need some more. And so if you want to see abortion end in your lifetime, you need to do everything you can to reelect President Trump, period, the end. I don't want to hear about what you do or don't like. There's stuff I said yesterday I don't like. But what matters is actions. Actions are what you believe. And that's really at the heart of where we're going as a nation. You want freedom, you want life, you want liberty, that's President Trump. If you want abortion till birth with your tax dollars footing the bill, if you want your guns taken away, if you want your liberties taken away, then Joe Biden's your guy. The choice is life or death, and it could not be more clear. And honestly, if you don't vote, that is a vote. It says, Bonhoeffer is attributed with the quote that silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to act is to act. And I'll just say, not to vote is to vote. And I think we're going to be accountable for every vote that we do not cast.
Yeah, and I even add that Christians who vote for a third-party candidate that has absolutely no chance whatsoever being elected, to me, that's throwing away your vote. To me, it's a non-vote. It's, I know the Christians, they say, well, I feel guilty for, because I do, I get it. President Trump has said things that would make you go, ooh, I get that. However, saying something and doing something, you got to measure the doing. Although we live in a culture where the measure is in what you say, because now we're stripping individuals of their positions and purposes of what they've served mankind based on something they said 40 years ago.
Right.
More,
and
whatever
let
the
me
case.
Interject something. Part of this is what is being reported. All right. Let's just say we recorded you all day long. We picked out the worst things you said, that's what's on the news every night. That's essentially what's happening with President Trump. But meanwhile, the fact that Joe Biden was using the N-word back in the 70s over and over again, the fact that he plagiarized speech after speech after speech, the fact that he can't seem to string a sentence together. I mean, people don't understand. We're talking about a guy that's got some real problems in what he says, as well as what he will do if elected. I mean, you put the two side by side, I'll tell you what, I pick President Trump every time, every single time. And that's just a question of not just what he says, but what he does. I hands down, he's the guy that is most aligned with Christian values and Christian principles. No question.
And I would want the reason I asked you about, and I love what you said about being marked as one of the most 5 dangerous, is because you said it's not just what you say, it's the things that you do. You do things, and that's what marks you in that. And that's what I want to say to individuals, because I run into the Christians. I travel full time. I go from state to state to nation. And I've heard the people say, God put President Trump in the White House and no man can remove him. And I'm not saying that God didn't position President Trump. It's not what I'm saying whatsoever. But what I am saying is, if you believe that no man can remove him and that absolutely positively nothing can do, and he gets his second term, I look at those same Christians and say, then don't go vote and see how that turns out for you. Because there's responsibility in the body of Christ. Our responsibility is to go vote. That is our responsibility. That's how important your vote is. It's why you carry it beyond this and you go and you look at the heartbeat bill, why you would get involved in politics and you would run for your state legislator, or you would run in your state the Senate, or whatever the case may be. If you ever start out local, whatever, you take those steps to start getting in that process to put you in a position that you can actually do something and not just settle for talking about it.
Yep, I agree with you that David Barton, I made a documentary called Light Winds, and it was dealing with the homosexual agenda. And one of the things David Barton says is that God doesn't just sweep in and save a nation. He works through people. It's not, oh, well, God's got this, so I'm going to sit on my hands. You know what? Joshua didn't sit in the tent and pray for victory and, well, I'd really like to not have to fight. No, he went out and he fought. He prayed for God to stop the sun so that he could conquer his enemies and see the kingdom advanced. But we don't get a pass. You know, we get what we deserve. And if we don't rise up right now in this hour, if we are unwilling to obey God, he's going to give us what we deserve. And that may be judgment. That may be, you know, the end of America. It could very well be. And so I think that there's a very big danger in people saying, well, I think Trump's God's pick. And so I don't have to do anything. No, if Trump is indeed God's pick, and I believe he is, because again, you line up who's closely aligned to the scriptures, to the Constitution, to the platforms. Well, it's the president, and so we can't have a pass. We can't sit it out because God works through people. That's the bottom line, and I wrote about that as well.
Absolutely. So, tell us how we can find your book, or we can possibly learn more about you and what you're doing.
Well, I don't know how long it's going to be offered on Amazon because I wrote in the book about Amazon. I'm not a big fan and some of the censorship that they're engaged in. So my recommendation, the best place I recommend is you can get actually a signed copy for the same price at f2a.org, faith, the number 2, action.org, or the shortcut, the letter F for faith, the number 2, A for action.org. Just click on a button, order it. We'll send you out a signed copy right away. And even if your state has already passed one, there are lessons in this. It is for those that want to pass it. I'm going to be speaking at a legislative conference in another couple of weeks, and we're going to equip. If you're going to be a sponsor of the Heartbeat Bill, I'm going to get this in your hands, and it's a way to know that you don't need a big group. If you are in your heart's desire, if God has put in your heart what he put in my heart, the desire to see the killing end, all you need is a handful of friends, maybe one friend that can see this through. If you're willing to do whatever it takes, you're going to end abortion where you live in a significant way, even again, just from the publicity in a blue state, but even in a purple state like Ohio. Keep in mind that the state of Ohio motto is true because Jesus was the one that said it. With God, all things are possible. I mean, I'm just telling you, we had prayer meetings where in front of the State House where they had, with God, all things are possible. People were just like, we're standing, we're kneeling on that seal, and we were literally standing on the word of God because it's going to come true. It's just a matter of when. And so you're not going to have to face the same brick walls we faced. I think we've helped to break through that by being, the first ones to introduce this bill. 10 have done it. It's a whole lot easier for every state that follows. So get it. It's f2a.org. It's a heartbeat away, and it has in it not just the political fights, but the spiritual battle. And it takes on the whole enchilada, and it's going to help you to be one of the most hated people by the left, I guess. You might be able to make the list. It'll be great to welcome you on board by those, the enemy that the devil hates in his top 10 list. That's a great goal to have.
Hey, it don't take much in my life. So, and my wife would tell me I achieve that daily because, I'm not afraid to poke the bear, but nevertheless, I sure do appreciate the opportunity that you've taken out of your day to be a part of this episode. I want to encourage everybody to go out, get a copy of Janet's book, A Heartbeat Away, learn as much information that you possibly can. And if you are in a state that has not yet passed the Heartbeat Bill, you can reach out to the ministry there with Janet and stuff and maybe learn about your state, or I'm sure that you can learn just learning through your state information and going and looking online, learn your representatives, your senators and such, and kind of start developing that strategy to learn so that when the time comes and you're positioned for this, you can be a proper voice in this. So with all that said, Janet, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I would just say that it begins with prayer and it ends with action. And if you want to know when is a good time, the default is now. Actions are what you believe. We need to do it now. And so what all we've done needs a finishing. We need to reach the finish line. And to do that, we need President Trump. And so we need you to vote. We need you to pray. We need you to engage in this election debate, because if you want to end abortion in your lifetime, if we want any of these things that we've done, all these victories we've seen in the last several years to mean anything, we need judges in the court that will actually uphold this, and we need President Trump to be there to appoint them. So that's my message: is vote Trump. Let's actually make America great again, and make America pro-life again. It's an exciting time. I think that it's one of the. I think that historically that the world is going to look back at this moment in our time and say this was their finest hour, that there is a great awakening that's happening. The enemy has overplayed his hand, and the church is waking up. Thanks be to God.
Come on. For everybody that's listening, I hope and I pray that this episode has challenged you. It has equipped you, and it has helped you in understanding how you can advance the kingdom of God. To everybody that's listening or watching, know that we love you, we honor you, and we bless you in the name of Jesus.
Thank you for listening to the Blacksmith Chronicles podcast. It is our prayer that this episode challenged you, encouraged you, and equipped you for the advancement of the kingdom of God. For more episodes or ways that you can partner with Ryan Johnson Ministries, please go to www.ryanjohnson.us or email us directly at info@ryanjohnson.us. Please join us again soon for another episode of the Blacksmith Chronicles.